Other sponsors we'd like to acknowledge for the evening are Satoshi's Living Room, NEM for helping with organisation of the venue, and of course Caleb and Brown. Housekeeping, men's toilets over here, ladies' toilets over there. Could I just ask you, when you are leaving, to leave via the back and then up the, out into the common area out here and up the steps, rather than going through the fire exits on the left and the right. For those who were here for the, which party was it? The Blockchain Centre opening party, we had an interlude with some apparently very handsome firemen, but so the girls said. But listen, so I'm looking forward to lots of questions as well. That's something we do ask for. So let's ask to the stage and give a round of applause to Jason Lee from NEM. Thank you.
Welcome everyone. Before I begin, just a bit of housekeeping. There are actually some empty seats here. So for those who are standing, especially the ladies, come to the front please. Yeah, if you want to make sure that seats, come on. As blockchain, we are all about supporting everyone, filling up the ecosystem. So anyone who would like to have a seat, I'm just going to give it 10 seconds. Anyone who would like to have a seat, please come to the front. If not, you're going to be standing for 1 hour or so. There are 4 or 5 spaces here. And I said to do that, can we all please give a big round of applause to Huobi Australia? They've done a fantastic job. There are about 170 different attendees that have RSVP'd via Meetup. I think you've also seen like a $10 discount code. They're doing so much for the community, and we'll do what we can to support even by just being here itself. I'd like to thank you all for being here too. So to begin off, my name is Jason. I'm the Expansion Director for the NEM blockchain, and we are around the world in 40 countries, and we're easy to use, and we also offer a security tokens platform where you can produce the mosaic or the equivalent of the ERC trading token. So for those who are new, it's represented by the ZEM cryptocurrency. It's one of the top 20 by market cap right now, and as you've seen in today's markets, it is volatile, but it is exciting as well being in this space. But to really focus on the presentation, it's going to be on the state of blockchain. And before I begin, I'd like to start with a story. The electrification of the US industry, USA, started in the early 20th century. People were entering into the labor force in farming, and when electricity started, it sparked something. People were able to have light bulbs at night to provide education and training. Heating and cooling was developed to allow for people to skill up through the labor force to now be a bit more inventive, which also led to the age of industrialization and to so many things. And we've taken for granted what electricity has done for us. And I'd like to draw this parallel to how in today, the 21st century, security tokens has the potential to electrify the fundraising industry in an unimaginable way. It will create a gravy train that will be like bees to honey looking to this. And one evidence is by looking into the regulators. Just last week, the ASIC was here, and we had John Price, the Commissioner, and Mark Adams, the Head of Strategic Intelligence for ASIC, and they say that in the last 6 months, they've been inundated with questions on STOs and securities than in the last 2 years combined. Now what's happening here? They are taking a closer look into this, and they are actively pursuing proactive and positive regulation with the other 200 regulators around the world. So what we're seeing is, from a regulation perspective, it works. Now, not to steal Alex's thunder on what security token offerings are, but just a blanket general overview, security token is typically a cryptographic token within a regulatory framework, which is represented by a fractional ownership of an underlying asset. So security token, it's easy to remember, ST, fractionalized ownership, F, and U, underlying assets. You figure out what you can remember it for. But the idea is that security tokens are going to be a big part of where the world is going for. Now, how does this compare with the famous utility token? Now, in a quick way, utility tokens are a bit like digital tokens that can be exchanged for something. For example, Falcon raised $257 million, and that is a utility token to then be able to convert for access to the decentralized storage platform that they have. But to focus on security tokens, it has been taking the world by storm. We've got the likes all the way in Colorado, the St. Regis Aspen Resort, raising an $18 million STO, which we just announced last week, and all the way to the attempted greatest STO of the world, which was a $300 million raise for the Keppel Island, which I believe has been changed right now. A private Singapore-Taiwanese investor has took over that. But we also have Nasdaq making announcements that they are developing platforms on STOs, all the way to Polymath, who raised $200 million to do a blockchain-based platform, which is SEC compliant, and with the work of T0, which is a decentralized crypto exchange, a security token exchange. And we've got companies like Harbor and Open Finance based out of the US working on this as well. So a number of companies are really focused on pushing what STOs would look like. Now over here in our backyard in Australia, did you know that we have people here that are looking to develop security token offerings? In the likes over here, we've got Picnic, which is an insurance on a blockchain platform in Sydney, claiming that they are going to do an STO on insurance. We've got also EMU, which is a hardware for quantum computing. In fact, we've got a representative there, Thomas, looking at doing an STO. I believe Metex is looking at it as well, which is looking at the metals exchange, all the way to Perth, where we've got crowdfund looking at property, and Concrete over here in Melbourne looking into something like this as well. And there's a company called Peloton Blockchain looking into developing a securities token exchange in Australia. There's so many things happening besides the flurry of what another way of looking at things sideways, the idea of an Australian national blockchain in collaboration with Data 61, IBM, I think Wilcox was involved as well in developing something like this. So we're seeing really things moving around here from a blockchain perspective globally. Now, how does this play within the market itself? Now, we've seen, and statistics have shown, 92% of ICOs have failed since 2016. Looking interesting. The Wall Street Journal looked into about 1,200 ICOs and found that almost a quarter of them are actually scams, copies of white papers. And we've also seen the counter opposing point to it, where the World Economic Forum says that 10% of the entire GDP could be on a blockchain by the year 2025. Tim Draper says, an investment guru, the crypto market is going to be an $80 trillion market in the next 15 years. The manufacturing market is going to be a $500 million market by 2025. We've got Walmart, Maersk, FedEx, UPS, British Airways all looking into this. Even our neighbors, Air New Zealand have been looking into this. All the big four banks here. So how does this all work between what security tokens is looking for? I had a conversation with Rory from Takumi and Rick as well, saying, where is STOs in this space? Are we in the baby, toddler, youth, or adult stage? One of them said, we're not even pregnant yet. No, it's so new and so early into this space that we're waiting for the first one to come up, right? Many people are pregnant with ideas, but the moment a token is up on the secondary market and we can all play with it and actually purchase it, that's when it works. And that's what the working of the 200 regulators around the world right now are looking, all these 200 different governments. It'll be interesting to hear from Rick. Rick's the Malta man. He just came back from Malta, and they are pursuing a lot of security tokens opportunity out there as well. But really, the question is not whether you are for or against security tokens. It's like asking our ancestors whether we are for or against the use of fire. So what then can you look into this? I think that STOs are going to be the future. It's cost effective, it's fast, it's global, trades 24/7, there's rapid adoption. And as long as the SEC approves it, it's going to go because the regulator has approved it. So right now it's a race to first to market on which regulator approves and which goes into the security token offerings and gets in there. The only negative is the limitation that a regulator would place on security tokens, and that's something that we need to watch out for. So really, in conclusion, the world is evolving in how things are looking like, and there are people looking at chasing to this, and different platforms working into this. So there are about 100 platforms across the world, from the Ethereum platform to Neo, Waves, Cardano, EOS, be it whether they've been pregnant or not. NEM is one of them as well. We're getting to this space, and we're seeing the trends that we are observing across the world. But the most important thing is that we actually do our proper due diligence and make sure that we understand what a proper definition of security token is within the Australian context, whether it's a managed investment scheme or something else, and also how can we have access to everyone here globally. Ultimately, it's all for us. right? If we can fractionalize our property, it provides more liquidity to our personal life. If we can fractionalize a number of our assets and collectibles, it will help us with a lot of the things that we want to go for. Banks used to give business loans, and now we go to peer-to-peer business loans. Imagine if you can do an STO loan for yourself in order to grow your business as an entrepreneur. That's what I'm excited about, and that's why I'm looking forward to this panel here. So that's a very quick state of the blockchain, and I'll just pass the camera to our next speaker. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. How you going, guys? Great crowd here tonight. I think when we came around in Melbourne at the height of the euphoria, we had about 400, and we came around again in the middle of the year when prices were down and there was a lot less people. But one thing we're certainly noticing is that there's those that are sort of interested in the space, and it's certainly picking up in numbers now. Everyone we talk to every day is excited about the future of this space, and I think security tokens is that next sort of exciting phase and natural maturation, I guess, of cryptocurrency. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction of all that. We've got some great speakers here tonight, and they're going to talk about regulation, so I'm not going to get too much into the nitty-gritty and all that side of things. But Nugget's news has certainly grown. We've got 70 employees now, and we find ourselves helping a lot of startups. It's always been community focused though, and we really appreciate sort of coming to these meetups because a lot of the projects, one of the important things for fundraising even is building that community and having a network of people that care about it and that have a genuine interest in your project rather than the traditional funding model of just seeking venture capitalists. So I guess Bitcoin and Ethereum with the sort of first and second generation, now you're hearing about these third generation platforms, but the space always needed to mature and have that regulation. Whether or not you may be aware, the first ICO wasn't last year during that height of the mania with everyone throwing Ethereum and all these white papers. It was actually 2013 when you could send in some Bitcoin and get some Mastercoin, and we had that same sort of concept for Ethereum. And the idea of owning a token and a stake in that platform, you're looking for platforms to invest in, and if those platforms get used more in the future and they have utility, they go up in price. But what we're seeing now is a lot of startups and companies that don't really fit that model. And one of the things myself and the team are constantly advising now is that you fit the equity model better, where we'd rather own shares or a stake in your company, and if you're profitable, we get the dividends and so on. So it's walking a tight line of regulation, and we believe that the average punter will be able to be involved in this space. There'll just be a few extra more steps such as KYC, a lot of those things you're already familiar with through exchanges, but it won't be as simple as that idea of just sending in some Ethereum and getting some tokens. And unfortunately, it really was just a future promise to build that network or that platform, and you're hoping they deliver some value. And we've always said that 99.9% of these are going to fail, and we're already starting to see that. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're scams. It may just be startups that run into those real-world issues that all companies face, and they fail. So having a bit more regulation in place, I certainly think makes people more accountable, and it's overall a good thing for. Thanks, Ben. Overall, a good thing for the space. One of the issues we also constantly talk to people about is the issue of raising money in Australia. So there's not a lot of venture capitalists, unlike living in Silicon Valley in the US. So if they go to these investors, often they want a lot of power. They want a lot of say on what the next steps of your business are to get into that next round of funding or the next stages. And a lot of these startups don't like that idea. Being able to fundraise and get that Ethereum, it really gives them the power, but that pendulum has probably swung too far to one side. We need it to come back where there's responsibility for those that have your money, whether or not the funds get released at certain stages when they meet goals. But having that regulation in place is going to be a very important next step. Also, the idea of being able to crowdfund from anywhere on the globe versus that VC model is a pretty powerful concept as well. So the example that I give is going into a bank in Australia and saying, I want to make a documentary, and they say, what about? And you say, well, I want to make a doco on the Royal Commission, and they say, oh, we're not going to fund that. The fact that now through Ethereum we can have 1 million people send you $1 and you get that $1 million to follow your dream and your idea, but that may not have been funded by banks and VCs and so on. So I guess that's the traditional side of things that I'd hate to see us lose, and the question we get all the time from the community is, can we still participate? So I'll let those guys answer that question for you as we go to the panel, but if we move back to that model of only getting those funds in from VCs, very closed doors without this wide ownership and community-driven projects, you start to say, well, why can't you just use private blockchains or a database? Why don't you just do a traditional IPO? So we need those important, I guess, factors that blockchain gives us: decentralisation, trust, and so on. But we also need to strike the right balance and that light touch of regulation. Otherwise, people are going to move away to other jurisdictions, as we've already seen. We do need to protect investors and consumers, but keep those values that really are at the core of this social paradigm. I really think it is a sort of generational shift that people want this move away from the centralisation of those power structures. So I hope we do keep those core values and we do find the right balance, but I think that security tokens are the natural maturation of the cryptocurrency space. So on to the next speaker.
Hi guys, and I love coming back to Stone and Chalk. So again, thank you to Stone and Chalk for hosting and all the sponsors as well that everyone's covered. I'm going to take you through a little bit about security tokens. So, but firstly, I just wanted to take you through my learning process over the last 3 months. My background is traditional stockbroking. I'm a computer science person. Worked for IBM for 10 years, and I had enough of IBM and all that kind of thing. I thought, I'll do my own thing for a while. So I started up. So as Adrian mentioned before, that I run a software company here in Melbourne called Paratech. So we've been writing trading platforms for a long time now. So we wrote for Comsec, and as again Adrian mentioned, we set up and we ran Open Markets, which is I think still today Australia's largest broker. So earlier this year, I kind of thought, there's got to be a better way of doing this. I bashed my head against the wall as the CEO for 4 years of a broking firm about the costs of doing traditional stockbroking. And around the world, it's going down to zero. We've got Robin Hoods and all these things going on. But here in Australia, it's a tough gig. And so we do a lot of trading. So we as Open Markets, we do about 50 billion a year in share trading. So it's a big enterprise, but I thought, I've got to figure out a better way. Is there a better way of doing this kind of thing? So earlier in the year I said, well, this crypto is really interesting. So apart from playing around with Bitcoin, I thought I need to go on a little bit of a journey. So we can scroll down a bit, but my little flicker has already died. But anyway, there's some interesting people in the industry. So the people that know who this fella is here, John, and so we did a crypto cruise around the Mediterranean, and John is a hell of a character. So he's a pilot, same as me. So we had a great chat about the world. Everyone know the guy on the side, Roger, and these guys. The fellow, does anyone know the guy up at the top? I guarantee. Does anyone know who that guy is? That's a really tough one. No, apart from the other guy, right? That's very good. Now, the other guy, Paul Middleton, this fellow here invented DNS, the domain name registry system. So there's apart from some characters on this thing, there's some really interesting people. So we went for a cruise, and it went from Barcelona to Monaco to Ibiza around. Has anyone been on that cruise? It's an interesting thing. If you ever want to go and see a crypto, go see what happens. Go on one of these cruises. So actually, can we just go down a little bit? So a couple other ones. Does anyone know who that guy is? Yeah, apparently he's coming to Australia. As I said before. Nugget was saying. The guy, okay, anyone know the guy in the middle of that top photo? Rock, yes, that's correct. I didn't bring any prizes, sorry. I did have some, but the guy on the right? Some must know. Miko, he's quite big in that area. And this is I had to throw this one in. It was a hard trip, right? That's me driving the boat out in Vista, right? So it turned out. But kind of jokes aside, the reason that I went on there is I kind of like everybody else. I just didn't know enough about the crypto industry, and I kind of thought that people like CZ here, they're doing an amazing job. So I kind of think there must be a better way to what we're doing with stockbroking. So everyone keeps telling me, and I won't go through because Trace did a great job on what security tokens are, so I'm not going to bother with that. But so what I wanted to do, there actually is a real presentation here. It wasn't just me bragging about my holiday snaps, right? So, so that's my details there and my email address, raklink@paratech.com. If anyone wants to send me an email, I respond to all emails. So anything you want to ask in terms of what I'm doing today. But so the question is, why are there security token exchanges, and why would someone like me be interested? As an ex-stockbroking IBM person, is there something useful amongst, I spent on the Bitcoin cruise, we argued every day about Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash, right? There was all these things that, it's invariably that were interesting, but they didn't get us very far in terms of the part I was interested in. So then I thought, well, actually, let's get back to the basics. What do we need an exchange for? So you look at the history, and so John's at the back, so I'm going to be very careful with all my anything illegal here. Is I refer to my lawyer at the back here, so anyone who is going to speak to John, right? But so what was an exchange meant to be? So if you look at the role of a stock exchange or any exchange, what it was designed to be originally was it was meant to help companies raise capital for growth, right? And the idea always was that if you want a country to grow, if we want Australia to grow, if we want anywhere to grow, we need a really good capital markets. The original idea of the exchange was to actually help companies list and raise money. Now, I'll get to it in a second, but we've kind of gone everywhere with this, right? But we'll come back to the point. We want to raise money at the lowest possible price. So if I'm an SME here or anywhere in the world, all these people in the room here, all you fintechs, there's so many cool fintech companies in here. What we should be doing as exchanges is taking these great ideas and really smart people in this room, a lot of startups. My son's 22 years old, he's just finishing his RMIT degree. And how do we give these kids a job? How do we've got really clever people in Australia, what are we here to do? So we've got to help companies raise money at the lowest possible price. We've got to regulate the quality of the companies that are listing to make sure that it's in the interest of the investor. And we've got to provide a fair and transparent point. Does that make sense, Madrid? Yep. That's what we started here to do. Next, please, Mr. Maestro. So why? The bit we said. If we can get a strong capital raising market, if here in Australia, if everywhere else in the world, if we can make it better, easier to raise money, we can take money we can help companies raise, they'll grow, they'll innovate, we can fund all of the elements of the economy, not just the big, large caps that are around the world, and what we're trying to do. And, really importantly, now there's some clever ideas coming along. So, ideally, a lot of the companies here, now we've got equity crowdfunding. Is anyone aware of the Jobs Act in the United States? Is you guys aware of that? Yeah, so the Jobs Act is a clever idea. So it says that I got a local hardware store in the US and I want to raise money. Right now it's difficult. Once I get over 500 shareholders, I've got to go to a public company and all this. So the Jobs Act in the US is very much like here in Australia with our equity crowdfunding, ECF, that you can raise money without going public. So in the US, the idea is you have 1,000 shareholders. Same with here, we want to have a lot of shareholders. We don't have to go public. You can stay a private company. So as everyone knows here, that the equity crowdfunding now is up and running here, and the government's got it going for public companies, and it'll go private soon. John, I think that doesn't matter. But now we're getting better ways of raising company without having to go to the ASX and Wall Street. Now the problem is, what do we need? We need a secondary market. How do you trade this stuff? Right. The problem is today, it's broken. The world I live in, the stock exchange, the ASX, the markets, it's not working. So this was a release, I think it was last week in the US. So interesting enough that there's 13 public exchanges in the United States. And actually they're owned by 3 public companies. And so the Exchange Commissioner, Robert Jackson, came out and said the for-profit exchanges aren't working in the interest of shareholders. They're not working in the interest of investors, and they're undermining fair competition. Why? It's the ecosystem is very expensive, very inefficient, and there's just hardly any innovation going on. Now, the interesting thing about Australia, we've got the same problem. So the ASX made $450 million profit this year. They paid out 90% dividend, the payout ratio. The problem is, what we need to do is, we've gone a little bit too far. You know, the exchanges used to be government owned, and their job was to help the economy. And what we've done is we've outsourced all the exchanges, they're demutualised, they've all gone out there, and the ability now that 90% payout ratio on $500 million, it should have gone back into this, it should have funded this building and the really smart people we have around here. Now, I've got nothing against for-profit companies, but what we've got to do is get back to, again, how do we do this so that we can actually raise money and go back to the basics, where the idea is everyone makes a fair profit, but we remove cost, right? We've got to make it fair again, and again, that's the beauty of the whole blockchain, all the kind of things that we're doing, and what we need to do now. So the whole premise of this is, I'm trying to figure out how do you take this idea, because the blockchain, the whole part of what we're trying to do, it has such application to the world I was living in. So, again, one more point on that. So in Australia, it costs us 5 times more to settle a trade than to place it. In Canada, it's 5 times more to execute the trade than to settle it. So you can see here we need to get a lot of efficiency. So we've got to drive it through other methods, because at the moment the for-profit system and making it public isn't working. Yes, please. And I don't need to show this slide, right? So the other way that we did it, let's pop up an ICO industry. And I'm like everybody else, that I get, I don't know, 2 to 3 a day. Everyone wants me to be an advisor, and they've got a great idea. Interesting story, I met Nikolai, the guy that runs ICO Bench. So anyone aware of ICO Bench? So we were with him last week in Malta. So Nikolai on ICO Bench, he gets all these proposals in the door and he looks at them and where to rank them on ICO Bench. The funniest thing is that his photo, he's an advisor on about 8 out of 10, or no, 2 out of 10 of the ones that come to him. He's not even an advisor. These people are just cutting and pasting, you know. And it's just, it's outrageous, the whole thing. That's another story in itself. But anyway, I won't really go into that. The New York Attorney General 2 weeks ago turned around and said there's a list of exchanges that they've got concerns that you can read it there. So I think that was the issue on about 2 weeks ago, in terms of that the ICO model. It was a good idea. It's a great way of raising capital, but like if everybody wants things unregulated, but this is what happens when we don't regulate things like where we're going now. There's a large amount, as the Attorney General, there's a large amount of unregulated trading. There's wash trades, there's layering, there's things that we can't do today in the traditional trading world that we're all regulated. That's not possible. And yeah, the 3 largest have all been now reported. And what the reasoning is, it doesn't matter at this point in time, but a lot of this needs to be looked at in terms of why are we here? Again, we're here to raise money from exchanges to help investors make money and help companies grow. And so we just got to get back to the premise, but we kind of, again, lost our way a little bit with ICOs, and it took off really well, but maybe for the wrong reason. So this is a quick diagram for everybody. I want to show you the world that I ran for the last 4 years. So if I can fix my pointer. I must have broken it. Does anyone know how to fix one of these? Do I drop it on the floor? Oh, yeah, that's working. Thank you very much. So just to show you, just an example of how it works. So here's our exchange. Here's our stockbroker. We've got corporate teams to list things. This is not to scale. It's just but we've got banks connected. All this T+2 banking. We're connected to other brokers. We've got T+2 settlements. We've got central banks connected in the back of chess and all the other things we do today. And over here, we've got that issue should be issuers. Sorry, it's a spelling mistake. I've got issues, but they're not those ones, right? And we've got voting and registry services. So when you look at it all, it's actually very, very complex. So in Australia, we've got the chess system up here that's running, the T+2. We've got all the problems about, it's very hard to settle in real time because the technology's here today, but the problem is to move the fiat around, we need central banks to come to Australia. The central banks work 8 till 5, or no, actually 10 till 4, whatever. So to move money around, we'll never get, it took the world 5 or 10 years to go, no more, 15 years to get from T+3 to T+2. Getting to T0 in the current world is impossible. It's just not, it's not going to happen. And that's because we've got such a convoluted arrangement here of networks, banks, fiats and central banks, all the central banks to buy one BHP stock in Australia. If someone from overseas buys it from you, we need, in Switzerland, we need a Swiss bank to send money, which sends it to the Australian bank, which da-da-da-da-da. So it will never get below T+2 because we can't do it. We need to completely re-engineer the whole process. And there's a lot of money tied up in these companies. So we have a very good one here in Australia, and not questioning for 1 minute, but it's a very simple service they provide, the registry services. And everybody who knows in the room, we have now smart contracts. We can do a lot of this. Registry services, voting, we have some of the best in Australia, some of the best tech people and ideas that are floating around in that area. And so between the issuer and the exchange, we're all plugged in other brokers. So if you want an IPO, all of these layers, someone's got to pay for all this. Someone's got to pay. So again, all the fintechs here, I love coming here. I walk around and meet all these things. The money that should have gone into starting up here, it somehow got absorbed in, it's broken again. It's got absorbed in all that kind of stuff. So maybe if you look at where we're going with security tokens and everything else, what we really want to do, we want to achieve the same things. We want to make sure that we're fully regulated. We need a much more efficient system. There's too many people clipping the ticket, as we call it, in the game. We've got to get a lot of middlemen out of the loop. And people that used to add value prior to the age of computing. When stock transfers, someone got on their bike and used to ride down the road between the two firms, and they had 5 days to ride down and they take the stock certificate and all that. We've got a huge amount of computing now. Why is it still that we do all this stuff, right? We're going to leverage, again, new tech, blockchain, smart contracts. And why? And we'll get to it in a second, but then we start moving into some cool things like fractional ownership. We do global things, and there's a lot of things that we can do. So if you look at where we should be, if we go one more, we can simplify this a lot. So what's happening is if we put the layer, if we do a real-time settlement, whether it's with fiat or crypto, this stuff can all go in real time. The software that we just write up the road here that processes 50 billion a year for open markets, we can take the same software. It's all fully compliant, does market integrity. We can put it into crypto. There's nothing for us. Then we just put a substrate layer in to do the custodial bit with blockchain. And the voting, dividends, a lot of this stuff isn't included in the underlying layer. Right? We don't need the whole broking structure. If you look at the way AIM worked, if you look in London, anyone familiar with AIM and some of the other alternate markets? Well, they've got a much more efficient process. So, in the traditional world, We've got the stockbrokers, we've got the advisors and the securities teams, and everybody's taking 7% here and 9% here. And you know, as a CEO of a stockbroker, the things that I got brought was unbelievable. So here we've got a deal for you. We've placed it. You know, you get in, and then we go to everybody else, right? And it's just the transparency's not there. So we want the issuer. We need to give them a little bit of help. For all intents and purposes, so as a regulated exchange, our listing process is the same as going onto a normal market. So we're putting it together. When you come to us, you need the same things. There is no, whether it's a white paper or an investment memorandum, whatever it is, you need the same things. You've got to be qualified for listing. There's rules you need to make, whether it's an EU listing or anything else, it's all got to work. And then obviously the fair date's in the back here, but the idea is, if you look at it, we've stripped everything out. Now, again, this is all in principle, right? Because there's no live STO exchange today. There's some ATSs in the US, but they're institutional only. The true benefit of security tokens comes in when we can get 1,000 people putting $50 into a stock, or 10,000 people putting $1,000 into a gold-backed token or whatever else. So we need a lot of people to get on board. Thank you. So that's what we need to do. What can we tokenise? So you've seen these slides before, but the calls all come in. It's, again, tokenisation works beautifully when you have high capital requirement projects. You've got gold mines. You want to tokenise a property. We've got some great ones in Australia. We've got Great Keppel, I think. What's the other one? There's a couple kicking around. But these are all over the world where people they want to tokenise a mine. They need to raise $50 million to build out a gold mine, and the token holders get gold. It's at 30% off list price, so it's guaranteed. But you've got a revenue producing behind it. You want to put a property up. You can run a property. You've got a property where the land's there. They want to raise $50 million from a whole bunch of investors to go and tokenise and build it. And these token holders can buy and sell. There's already some large gold tokens out there that they've already tokenised the gold mine, but they can't list it. They're looking for a secondary market to do this on. Artwork, venture capital, anything can be tokenised. And the gold one was a key one that we're looking at. That's probably the interesting one, but it's, there's a history of gold and a medium, but it's quite fascinating. Excuse me. That we're getting them through as they want to. That's the history of gold, but that's the interest from everybody. About running it. The gold mine tokenisation, diamond mines. We've got them in Australia. That people wants to do lithium out of Costa Rica. They want to do the most fascinating things that people want to tokenise. But again, taking it back to where we all started. One more time. And then this is kind of the one that I think most people, pick any number you like on tokenisation possibilities. You pick numbers, they say 256 trillion, what you can tokenise in terms of that. The number, everybody quotes any number under the sun. But that's the tokenisation. Malta, as I said, I spent a lot of time there because, again, the reason they always says why Malta, why these countries, they're taking their corporations law and reviewing it all and making it friendly for blockchain. So you can do real-time transactions. You don't need wet signatures. So what we're going to do in Australia as well is push that same line, that we need to move down that path. The ASX is going blockchain, but what limits them is not the technology, it's our corporations law. So we need to get onto that as well as a country and start working in that area. Now, I think that's my time, right? So hopefully that didn't... Was I on time? No, that's wrong. On time. So hopefully that sort of explains a little bit of what I do. So I get to travel a lot, way too much, and I'm still a learner as well. So I learn every time I come into one of these things. So I really thank everyone for the opportunity to speak. I'll be around for another half hour. But thank you all for listening in, and if you have any questions, please come and see me. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bassilios. I'm a special counsel at Wilcox Lawyers. Unfortunately, I'm stuck discussing the boring bit today. That's the law. I'll try to make it as interesting for you as I can. So the first thing to note is this presentation is general, not specific, so you need to get advice for your specific circumstances. Another thing, and this might sound obvious to some people, but it hasn't been obvious to a lot of clients that have come to see me, that just because you're incorporated in a particular place, for example, someone incorporated in Malta, and Malta has utility token laws, that doesn't mean that you don't need to comply with Australian laws when you come to Australia. So that's a really important point for people to know. This presentation is focusing on Australian law, but you need to be aware that you need to obtain advice from every single jurisdiction in which you intend to actually offer your security tokens, and utility tokens for that matter. So what are security tokens? Generally, the basic principle is that a security token is a share in a company, but it's not actually limited to that. A security has a very wide definition in Australia, as it does in the US, and it's actually a much broader definition in the US. So it can be shares in a company, it could be a loan that's made to you by the public. So for example, I've heard of initial loan offerings. Initial loan offerings in Australia would be considered security tokens because it is a security. ICOs involve the sale of tokens which basically don't necessarily give people rights, whereas with security tokens, it can be some sort of form of equity or can give people a security interest. For example, the right to be repaid a loan. They can also have dividend and voting rights, although they are not essential. So why have security tokens popped up? So the vast percentage of crypto projects have failed, and investors don't necessarily have any rights, and there's no intrinsic value associated with ICOs. In addition, regulators generally think that most token offerings are securities in any event, and in Australia they're more likely to actually be considered managed investment schemes, and they attract heavier regulation. In fact, 2 weeks ago, ASIC came out and said that they had put a stop to 5 ICOs, essentially on the basis that they are managed investment schemes under Australian law, and I'll get to that in the next slide to explain it in a little bit more detail. So an STO involves complying with the regulatory landscape for securities, so the STO issuers have a reduced risk of unforeseen regulatory interference, and it gives clarity in relation to the rights of investors, and the issuer takes on the legal and financial obligations of traditional security issuers. So why are your typical ICOs a managed investment scheme under Australian law? This is a pretty dense slide, but I'll try to simplify it for you. The test for whether something is a managed investment scheme has 3 elements. The first element is that people contribute money or money's worth. So just through a show of hands, how many people here think that the first element is meant for an ICO, that people actually contribute money or money's worth? Yep? A few people? Okay. So yes, so it doesn't matter whether you pay in fiat or you pay in crypto, you actually, all ICOs essentially meet that first limb of the definition of a managed investment scheme. The second limb is that that money is pooled or used in a common enterprise for the purposes of basically producing financial benefits or benefits consisting of rights. So how many people here think that that would be the case for most ICOs? Fair few show of hands. And then the last element is basically that people don't have day-to-day control over the money that they've contributed. And essentially that will be all ICOs. So that's why in Australia, most ICOs are considered managed investment schemes. Now what are the downsides of being considered a managed investment scheme? So it depends on whose perspective you're looking at it from, right? So if you're the issuer, the downside is this. You need to hold an Australian Financial Services licence which authorises you to operate the scheme. 2, you need to register the scheme with ASIC, and you need to lodge a constitution and a compliance plan, both of which need to meet certain requirements contained in the Corporations Act. Number 3, you need to produce what's called a product disclosure statement. Number 4, it can't be marketed by any Joe Blogs, It can only be marketed by persons who hold an Australian financial services licence that authorise them to promote that managed investment scheme. And lastly, managed investment schemes can't be listed on an ordinary crypto exchange. They need to be listed on a financial markets exchange or traded through a market maker who holds an Australian financial services licence that authorises them to do that. So you can see there are a lot of regulatory implications associated with conducting an ICO in Australia where it meets the definition of a managed investment scheme. Now, there are potential structuring options open to people so that you can structure it so it's not a managed investment scheme, but the easiest by far is to treat it as a security because the regulatory implications are a lot less, and I'll go through that now. So who are the winners and losers when it comes to an STO? So the winners are the company itself that's doing the STO because it has legal certainty for the offer, and in general there is greater legitimacy associated with offering shares in a company than a token in a project. Secondly, investors, and that includes VCs, institutional investors and ordinary investors because they get a stake in the company and due to various investor protection laws that need to be complied with. Who are the losers? The small-time investors, because similar to managed investment schemes, you can't list security tokens on any crypto exchange. You need to list them on a financial markets exchange or with someone that has a market maker's licence that authorises them to trade in those securities. So you don't have that liquidity. Now, having said that, I am aware through hearing through the grapevine that there's probably about 5 people in Australia that are currently going through a process that will allow them to make a market in security tokens in Australia. One of the losers is also the company itself because you generally need to give up some equity and control in your project in order to do an STO. And those wanting anonymity. So with an STO you cannot have anonymity because the company is legally obliged to maintain a register of its equity holders or shareholders or security holders. And the importance of that in a blockchain context is that for the register, you need to keep a register that is both on-chain and off-chain because of that requirement to maintain a register. And then similarly to the case of managed investment schemes, the marketers of ICOs are losers because they can't market these security tokens because they need an Australian financial services licence or they need to be authorised by someone who has the appropriate authorisations on their licence. So what do you need to comply with if you are undertaking a security token offering? So as compared to the managed investment scheme example that I gave previously, there is only really a disclosure obligation with respect to the offer of securities in Australia. And that offer is governed by the Corporations Act and in particular Chapter 60 of the Corporations Act. That disclosure obligation does not apply to all circumstances. So, for example, if you're only offering the securities to sophisticated and professional investors, you don't need to comply with the disclosure obligation. And also, if you're making personal offers, so a personal offer is not one that's advertised to the public, but made to people who you know personally or who you know might otherwise be interested in such an offer, provided that you don't offer it to more than 20 people in a 12-month period and you don't raise more than $2 million. Now, these 3 limbs are not mutually exclusive, and you can raise money under all of those limbs without actually having to issue a disclosure document under Australian law. When you do actually need to issue a disclosure document, there's basically 3 choices. One is a full form prospectus, a short form prospectus, or an offer information statement. An offer information statement is only available for offers of less than $10 million, and the other 2 are for offers of more than $10 million. The requirements for each of them are quite different. So a prospectus is a very long document, generally speaking, and it's an unabridged document containing the information necessary for investors and their professional advisors to make an informed assessment of an offer of securities. Now, that might seem as not a lot, but there's actually a lot that goes into that based on case law and ASIC regulatory guides that have been released. Then there's the short form prospectus. For a short form prospectus, you need to meet all the requirements of a prospectus. However, you can give investors a shorter form of document and lodge the rest of the information with ASIC and refer investors to that information that's been lodged with ASIC. And an offer information statement is a much abridged version of that, and you don't need to comply with additional requirements other than some prescriptive information that needs to be included, and I'll go through that with you now. So with a prospectus, it needs to include information that investors and their professional advisors are reasonably required to make an informed assessment of the rights and liabilities attaching to the security tokens, the assets, liabilities and financial position and performance, profits and losses and prospects of the company. There are also certain fees that need to be disclosed with respect to people who are involved in the offer, the quotation of securities if applicable, and a statement that the prospectus has been lodged with ASIC. So importantly to note, with an offer of securities, the documents that you prepare need to be lodged with ASIC, and then there is a 7-day period which ASIC has to review those documents before you can provide them to the public. Offer information statement only requires you to include the prescribed information, which is a lot less than what is required for a prospectus, which is basically the identity of the company and the nature of its securities, a description of its business, what the funds will be used for, the risks involved in making the investment, details of amounts payable in respect of the securities, statement that's been lodged with ASIC. You need to say that it's actually not a prospectus and it's a lower level of disclosure than that required by a prospectus. You need to state that investors should obtain professional advice before investing, include statements, financial statements, and any information that is otherwise prescribed by the law. Okay, that's it. There's my contact details. Feel free to connect, and I'll pass it on to Alex. Thank you.
So guys, now we're going to have a panel discussion, so get any questions ready, and we'll welcome all the guests back to the stage. And Prash from Caleb and Brown, who a lot of you may be familiar with. If you've got a question, James will look around with the microphone. Anything from you guys to start with?
Hi, great talks, thank you guys. I'm concerned about tokens not actually being used for the purpose they were meant, whether we're talking security or utility tokens. I mean, they were designed originally, or mostly, or partially, for operated blockchains and all that. Have you guys seen any data about whether tokens are really being used for blockchain purposes as opposed to secondary market trading? Because I'm concerned that a lot of the coins will become shit coins because they're not really being used.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like I said, one thing we've always said is that 99.9% of these are going to fail unless they have real use cases. It's those ones that are already being used today that have some intrinsic value just on the basics of supply and demand. They put upwards pressure on the price and so on. And unfortunately, yeah, those ones that don't get used will go to zero slowly if they don't have any of that real use case. So you're right that yeah, it's been used as a funding model or a scam in a lot of ways, and very few have working products yet.
I guess one key difference that I would think about between the ICO model and security token model is that with the security token you actually have a proportion of the equity of the underlying asset, so the company, for example. And if I was investing in an STO, I'd probably be looking at what proportion of the equity is actually being put out in an STO. If I had a company that was putting out 98% of the equity in an STO, they've got nothing to lose. There's no down payment, really. As opposed to a company that had 20%, for example, in an STO, where there's considerably something to lose and there's a big vested interest in the success of that particular token, which makes it that's one of the few things that really makes it considerably different from an ICO versus an STO, and that's probably one rule of thumb to look at. If not, yeah, you're right, you're very likely to head down exactly the same route, a token becoming a sacrificial lamb for a company that's going to fail.
I guess one parallel example is with the internet protocol. 20 years ago in 1996, people say, what good is the internet for? It takes me hours to send a message and it's slow and I've got to boot the computer. I think we're at this stage as well. It's always that similar cliche. But one thing that really I feel is a trend that's going to pick up is actually tokens that are actually used in the gaming industry, where swords and digital gold is being traded as credits, but they're actually tokens in the blockchain. We haven't seen something that is on large-scale use on a mass adoption level besides the CryptoKitties that we're familiar with, but that could be something that would be a mass adoption from tokens in the blockchain.
Yeah, totally agree. I think there's 2 points to that as well. So I think one good thing is all the FOMO on ICOs, I think it's finished now, right? So no one's really running it anymore and throwing the money on the table. But the good thing, one of the interesting things about security tokens, wherever you're going to, they need to be listed, right? Anyone can issue them in a primary market, but can these things be actually listed? So if you look at Malta's or Singapore with the RMOs, or in Switzerland they're doing it, so they're all raising the rules around listing a security token. And interestingly enough, the rules are very, very similar to listing an equity. So don't just look at the issue of the primary market, as in the issuing of the STO. Make sure that actually can list somewhere. Does it qualify, right? So every market in the world is about to release. They'll all have their onboarding rules about listing on an exchange. So don't worry about the primary. Worry about can it actually be listed and can you get out of this thing. That's the beauty of security tokens. As a secondary market, it has to be listed.
What's the technology below the token? Are they ERC 721 or are they the ERC 20 token? Or are they on the Ethereum? They'll have to be on the Ethereum blockchain.
So, I mean, Jason's from NEM, and we can already do mosaics on NEM, and on Ethereum we can just set different standards. So, as you said there, 721 is a non-fungible token, so we can sell a sword in a game that's not divisible versus a token in an ICO that we can sell half of on an exchange. So, yeah, there's new standards for Ethereum, and anything to add to that on
No, basically, there are about 100 different platforms, right? So Ethereum is the most popular, and there are multiple others. So and people are building it. So EOS, Bancor, Polymath, Harbor, Open Finance, T0, the list goes on, right? So the idea is that there are protocols looking at it, but Ethereum is sort of the popular one. But I think that there's space for multiple more to grow.
Just a quick one. With ICOs being basically tarnished permanently because of all the fraud and scams, do you see many ICOs relaunching as STOs? Like, would that be an option that they could go and just go, hey, we know we sort of did it wrong, let's relaunch as an STO and have a second chance?
So this is an insight, right? Every company has a shelf life. So before this oil and gas and probably the top market cap companies, their shelf life is gone. Now the top market cap companies are tech companies like the Amazons, Alibabas and Facebook. They're going to have a shelf life and it's going to be something else. It could be space infrastructure, it could be something else. But within the crypto world, it's accelerated at an exponential velocity that today is ICOs, tomorrow is STOs. In fact, beyond STOs, there could be something else as well. But what we are seeing is an acceleration of company shelf life from being relevant to being irrelevant. So there could be a potential.
I'm working with a few clients at the moment who had intended to do an ICO and actually started publishing material for an ICO. Then they came to see me and I raised this issue with them that they're potentially managed investment schemes under Australian law. And as such, we're working at the moment with them to restructure the offerings to rely on these wholesale investor tests to raise money initially from wholesale investors only, to then build the platform. So you've got a platform that's functioning and working, and you've got a utility token that actually works, Then you can go to the market and sell it as a pre-sale of the service, and it won't be managing the risk.
Zug, Malta, Cayman Islands, all the, Singapore, Hong Kong, all those jurisdictions seem to be wiping the floor with a lot of other jurisdictions, I'd say probably Australia included, in terms of their friendliness towards crypto and ICOs. Do you see that as the emergence of a trend, particularly with reference to what John was saying about jurisdictions, you having to comply with the laws in every single jurisdiction that you offer a token to?
Look, I think you're right that the jurisdictions in which these laws are being passed are getting a bit of a leg up because people are flocking there to do their ICOs or whatever, and I think that Australia needs to do something similar, otherwise we're going to be left behind and all the projects are going to go overseas. But notwithstanding that, as you noted from my presentation, you still do need to comply with other jurisdictions' laws, but notwithstanding that, these jurisdictions are a honeypot for ICOs and utility tokens.
That's a great question. Let me talk about some of those jurisdictions. So I've kind of had the pleasure of looking at all of them indirectly or in my travels with all my pictures, right? But let's use Malta particularly. So it's interesting, right? So Malta has 450,000. It's a very, very small population. It's a really, really small population that, believe it or not, it has only two exports. It's potatoes and rabbits. Right? Rabbits. So the national dish of Malta is a rabbit. And it's surrounded by beautiful seafood. So as anyone, if you go to Santorini or you go to Mykonos, you've got beautiful seafood, but they use rabbits. Now what's fascinating really quickly about Malta is they have no exports. They have nothing. So Malta started off years ago in Cyprus. They were the biggest in foreign exchange trading. Then they moved into wagering, right? They lead the world between Malta and Cyprus on wagering. But wagering is getting difficult. People that are aware, the US about 2 months ago announced legalisation in all 50 states of wagering. So some of these countries, they innovate because they have to. Right? They have no choice. So if you have no exports, you have nothing. If you want a GDP, you have to do something smart. So what we've got to do in Australia is think the same way. Right? So, and to John's point, this is all fixable, but they want it more than we do. And it's an unbelievable area. We've got all the technical smarts. They're all in here. Right? We've got an ability to do it, but we just don't have a framework. Exactly to John's point, that again, the corporations law. So Malta, Gibraltar, Estonia, they rewrote the corporations law from scratch, purely. So they, again, you don't need wet signatures. You can use public-private key signing. Our problem is definitely not technology. We have the smartest people. We're the smartest people in Australia of all, but why everyone's overseas is because we're not hungry enough in this country. Sorry? Well, no, and it's a good point, right? If, to be honest, sorry, let me harp on this is my soapbox thing. You're going to give me one extra 30, 10 seconds, right? But exactly. So the problem why everyone goes overseas is because, quick story. When I was overseas, I can't believe it. I've been away for 2 weeks, and I was in Malta and I was everywhere else. The only thing I heard from Australia, apparently on the Sydney Opera House, we put a horse racing thing. And all the politicians and everybody in it made the press. And you think, that's what we worry about in this country, right? We changed 5 prime ministers in 5 years, and the number one thing we fought about in the last week was a shock jock saying that I want my horse up there on the Sydney Opera House and all that. That's our problem. Right? That's our problem.
I think there's something else beyond just regulation paving the way. So you brought up Malta has rabbits and potatoes. I was born in Singapore. Singapore has 2 major exports: jokes about chewing gum and crazy rich Asians. That's pretty much it. And necessity is the mother of all invention, and that's what's driven these jurisdictions to do what they do. And so Singapore's moved forward in terms of jurisdiction. But the other major thing that you need to attract these businesses across is banking infrastructure. And that's something that we constantly and consistently shy away from talking about. Because the banking infrastructure in Singapore still hasn't caught up. So crypto companies in Singapore are still struggling to get bank accounts. They're still doing the whole damn loophole of setting up shell bank accounts just so they can get shell companies so they can get a bank account. And be keen to see what these other jurisdictions are doing, but definitely I can tell you in Singapore, that's still a shortfall. And definitely in Australia, I mean, we can do whatever we want about jurisdiction, but banks are still private enterprises, and they don't fall within the same sort of jurisdiction that we're necessarily talking about. And until that sort of catches on, we're still going to be hamstrung by that leg.
Just one line, right? Binance in the last quarter announced $314 million in transaction fees, and they're registered in Malta. Guess where they want the money go? That's a question. All right, thanks.
And one more point. So it's a really good point on banking, but why don't banks bank ICO? I'll tell you why not. We all know in the room why a bank wouldn't deal with crypto today. Everybody's running around so the banks won't do it. The banks will start dealing with, let's not call it crypto. In Malta, Estonia, it's called a virtual financial asset. Right? So once it's regulated properly, the banks will flood themselves. We're talking with one right now. So the minute that these people are regulated to EU standards, to Australian standards, once people are regulated, the banks will work with them. But we can't keep saying, the banks don't work with us. Everyone's complaining that one of the big banks here keeps shutting off their crypto account. It's for a good reason. Right? So once we regulate the industry, the banks will happily deal with us. That's a good one. There are a whole bunch of them. I've got about 7 of them. One just did a project. They raised $50 million for a mine in Vegas. So they raised the money. And 2 seconds on that. It's a really clever idea. So what you do in the gold industry, there's 3 companies in the world that traditionally, they're like De Beers. There's 3 companies that control funding into the gold industry. So if you've got land and you've got gold down there, there's 2 ways you can get money. Well, actually, there's 3. The first one is go to one of these 3 companies, and they'll take about 50% haircut. So, what's the gold price? Anyone know the gold price? If the gold price is $1,000 an ounce, you have to give it to them at $500 an ounce. The second way, if you want to fund $50 million, you go to a bank, and that's a really quick conversation, right? So, there's a door. There's a third way coming, right? So these security tokens, someone's already successfully raised $50 million. They raised the money, they've done the mine, now they're trying to get a secondary market to do it. And it's a regulated product, and you'll see more of that in the next few weeks, what's going on. But the lithium, gold, all these kind of things, they'll just follow the same model. Because again, it gets rid of the barriers, because security tokens are ideal if you need a lot of capital and you don't care if you've got a whole bunch of small shareholders. It's a really clever model, and it fits in beautifully with a lot of capital-intensive industries. So you will see a whole bunch more of these start up. The big problem right now is that they can do lots of them, but the problem is these people sit on their security tokens and they can't get out of them. So again, it's waiting for a secondary market.
I don't recall the name of this, but grabbed me after the presentation. I've got it on my phone. I met with someone today who's doing a token which is redeemable for the value of 1 gram of gold. So you pay whatever 1 gram of gold is for that token, and in the future you can redeem it for whatever gold is worth at that particular point in time, and that creates the liquidity. But they're doing it as a derivative, because they recognise that it meets the definition of a derivative under Australian law rather than a security.
How's it going, guys? My name's Harley, I'm from Agile Eagle. You all look great tonight. So first of all, STOs, they're great, they look great, but what I'm going to talk about is barrier to entry. So, as you may know, there's 2 big barriers to entry on both sides. So you have your company, who need an AFSL, and then you have your digital exchange, who needs a market license. These things aren't these things aren't easy to obtain. So what do you guys think will happen in the market? Like, will there be a monopoly, do you think, possibly, with the exchanges? Because not any exchange can get their market license.
Just to go on your first point about the AFSL, if someone's doing a security token offering, I don't believe they need an AFSL, because the issuing shares in your own company or securities in your own company does not require an AFSL.
So in relation to an MIS, let's say.
Oh, MIS, that's different. Yeah.
So
I think the move is going to be away from MISs and into securities, pure securities, because as you identified, it is a barrier to entry. Some people actually want to do an MIS, so there's people who want to tokenise interest in managed investment schemes, whether it's real property or other assets. They will move towards the AFSL model, but others I think will move towards a security token offering. The second part of your question about the exchanges, so there's two different types of exchanges that you can operate under two different licences in Australia. The first is the market operator licence, which is the same as the licence that the ASX has, or NSX. The second is, and this is not really a market as we probably understand that term, but you can have an AFSL which authorises you to make a market in securities. What that means is that you, the person who holds that licence, is the counterparty to every buy and sale of the security. Those licences are much easier to get, and I understand there's about 5 people who are applying for those licences specifically for security token offerings in Australia at the moment.
But do you think it will hinder innovation for projects? It's not so easy for a project to do an STO in comparison to a digital currency.
Oh, for sure, and I think what you're really getting at is, and this is my personal view, that Australia should regulate to have a light touch regulatory regime for what we understand to be utility tokens. They should be excluded from the definition of a financial product and the definition of a managed investment scheme, and it should be based purely on disclosure, a mandated disclosure regime. No licensing, no registration, none of that, but just pure disclosure. That's my personal view.
I'll leave it at that.
No question. Does it cost more in legal fees to do an ICO or STO? Don't need to answer.
It really depends, right? Because for an STO, there's quite a rigorous process that most people go through. It's called a due diligence process, which if you go through that process, it's quite extensive, and it affords you a specific defence in the Corporations Act. So that if you go through that process, and something that you've said in your prospectus turns out to be incorrect, but you've gone through that process, you've got a defence. That defence is not available in an ICO context, so arguably there's less work to do, right?
It's a really good question. So in this country, what we need to do, John's 100% right. So in Singapore, it's an RMO. It's a restricted market operator license. It's setting up in Hong Kong's setting one up in Malaysia. In Malta, it's called an MTF. It's called a multilateral trading facility. So all of these jurisdictions are coming up with there's still a full EU, in this case it's an EU approved licence, and you can deal with it anywhere in the world. But the innovation comes from that they've got to get in there, and it's not just the market licence, it's all the other underlying things that need to be done as well. But you're absolutely right, we need to lobby in this country that we take it seriously, because otherwise this capital will flow offshore, and we don't want to do that, right? We don't want people to go overseas and set up in Singapore and Hong Kong and all that, because again, it takes away jobs and it takes away all the capabilities in this country. So we need to ensure that, like, was it ASOP, that we had an exemption for a company that did private equity, they did equity crowdfunding, and the government had a class order to give them the ability to do it. So we need to do something similar in Australia to provide that kind of capability, like John mentioned, that we have that capability, which the companies can list here, raise capital here, keep their people here. That's what we should all be fighting for.
During the speech you mentioned that marking the UK itself as a platform market. Could you comment on that versus the OTC market in the US?
Yeah, just to repeat the question, there was why AIM, the reason I mentioned AIM. So does anyone know AIM, what it did? Does anyone know AIM? So what happened in London, we had the London Stock Exchange, as we all know. But the problem is that the barrier to entry gets higher and higher and higher. And so AIM popped up 10 years ago, you know better than me, 15 years ago? 15 years. So AIM actually set up a reduced framework. It was still regulated the same way, but there were a lot lower barriers to entry. And so it was what everyone remembers, the Bendigo Stock Exchange, which became the National Stock Exchange. So AIM set up with what was called a nominated advisor structure. You didn't need to go to a broker. it was a whole process where they've tried to lower the cost of raising capital in the market. So London's trying that again. We've tried it in Australia. So as John mentioned, we've got the National Stock Exchange, we've got the Sydney Stock Exchange. It worked well for the Bendigo one to raise capital from gold and secondary raisings, but AIM worked well. It was very focused, much lower cost. It had lower barriers to raise capital. And so, but we need the aim of security tokens here in Australia to think laterally and provide that same level of thinking, apply new technology, and get up and running as quickly as we can with that same. But it literally was. It's a secondary market, lower cost of entry, and it was extremely successful. Like AIM signed up, what, 500, 1,000, I don't know, in a year or two. So it's unfortunately our local exchanges have got, the two of them have, one has 2 or 3 listings, the other one's got 40, whatever, and kind of going backwards, unfortunately. So it's a matter of resurrecting that, because the question, it's very hard to get a markets license in Australia. It took Chi-X 5 years, 4 years.
Why is it ASX doing that?
That's probably not for me to. It's one of those ones. It's because what we all got to do is that. And the question is innovation. We need to innovate in these companies as well, because to attract talent, to attract clients, we need a good product. And if the product's not right, no one's going to come. So it's about representing the product. And there's a great opportunity now with what's going on to that, to ask that exact question, but obviously I can't say.
Thank you. My question is a little bit technical. In the traditional stock exchanges, you have, or like in the ICOs, you have auditors who are looking at the accounting books and making sure that everything is done correctly. Now, all this is done automatically on the blockchain using smart contracts and airdrops, etc., etc. So all the discussion so far has been based on assuming that the codes are doing exactly what they are supposed to do. But I mean, so far it is all governed by the society, by the community. Now, once you talk about government regulations, when you talk about investors want to put real money in, then people want to make sure that these codes are actually doing what they are supposed to do. So is there a body to, like a third party, to verify these codes? Is there a new generation of auditors who are coding geeks who are also understanding accounting? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the number one industry popping up right now is security token auditors. It's a big business, right? So anybody setting up an exchange needs auditing processes. And so if you're going to list a token, you need to actually have auditing done on your security token by an independent company, because it's really important. This token controls the voting, the voting. It controls the dividend policies and all that. So it's actually in the regulatory framework. So to an exchange, in terms of the sign-up process, anywhere in the world, will have, like if you've got an AFSL or you're an exchange in Australia, you need to get an annual audit, an ASIC-approved audit that needs to go through all that kind of information. So in the regulatory world, that whole process of security token, the issuing, that they're correct, if you're burning them, all of that is audited, and the question still is who's going to regulate it. So it's a really good question. So there's all these independent there's groups popping up of exchanges where they're going to get together and discuss exactly that point. Because in Australia, I run 3 AFSLs, so I've got to get an FS 7071. I get an ASIC auditor into my AFSL. They have to sign all those kind of questions off that we're complying with the Corporations Act and everything else. So it's not defined yet, but every exchange is going to need to do exactly that.
Hey, Tristan. Hi, I'm Rolf from Impact OTC. I also am recently an advisor to a group called Liquid Token, who also has a tokenization platform. In that context, we've started to do some thinking about a deep philosophical challenge that the industry has. This is essentially, for those of us that have come into this industry to sort of make a better world, if we remove all friction from asset ownership, then people are going to buy the dip, just as they do, and pretty soon the rich own not just the current assets, but the land and a lot of other things as well. So we're looking to set up a think tank for those that are in the industry and those that are interested to start to look at some clever ways which we believe are possible to start to address that. So that I'm just putting that out there for those interested. But I'm also very interested to hear any thoughts that you have.
I'll get a quick thought on that. I'll give you the reverse. I think it's the first time that we can get around that problem. Because right now, and again, as a 4-year, 5-year insider in the securities business, you're not seeing any of the deals. By the time it comes out to mum and dad's, it's been everywhere, right? You wonder why, what's going on. So actually we want the reverse. We want to use this as a facility that everybody's a client of the exchange, everybody gets access at the same time, there's no pre-selling it to other people and placing people and then letting it out of the market. We need to do the reverse. And so we're finding, actually I think we're going to find the reverse. If we do this properly, absolutely the reverse.
Look, I'm an advocate as well, but the reality is when the market crashes, it's the wealthy that can scoop up the bargains.
I'll give you a philosophical answer. So, a world without friction is a very dangerous world. Imagine if that happens, I'd slip off my shoes and my seat automatically, right? And that's where the regulators come in intentionally to place friction so it doesn't become T+0, because they'll be really scared if something like that happens, because there needs to be some form of friction in order for the world to operate. So, Prash, from an OTC perspective or securities, what do you think?
Just for the sake of disagreeing. There's behind every utopian reality there stands a very strong dystopian shadow. But I'll give you the other utopian possibility of frictionlessness and a use case for tokenization, which fits into a more utopian world perhaps. One of the things I like to always imagine is the tokenization of taxes. So I don't have any problem with paying taxes. I believe that my taxes should go to welfare, to healthcare, to public housing, to public transportation. I have a problem with a defence budget. That's what I crucially have a problem with. I have a problem with my money going towards my politicians buying a new batch of F-16 so they can wave their collective phalluses around. That's what I have a problem with. Imagine a world where you could, of tokenization of taxes, where instead of paying your taxes sort of arbitrarily towards a democracy that you think you chose, who then get to decide exactly what they want to do with that money. Instead, you got to tokenize your taxes into particular parcels which you thought you wanted that to truly go to. All of a sudden, your economic power, your fiscal power, takes on a greater power, takes on a greater libertarian power, it takes on a greater socialist power than a centralized authority could ever make possible. Because it wouldn't, because we're human beings and we're psychologically, basically, primarily flawed. That, I think, is one of the great use cases of tokenization, which steers completely away from the capitalist paradigm and lends itself back to the true libertarian cause, which this entire industry was fundamentally based on. I think I've spoken about this once before, and I'm sorry if I'm ranting on things that I commonly rant on about, but these are the kind of things we possibly should rant on about.
Hey guys, I think most of you know me. Aaron, I think Prash just sort of answered the question we're about to ask. Do you think with all this SDO and people not being able to raise money from ICO or a utility token, do you think it's actually killing the industry as such, or the utility? So everyone's sort of forgetting about a utility and just trying to raise a security instead of using technology what it was actually built for. So I know we personally are looking at having an SDO next year, but we're still going to have a utility, just not doing our money raise off the utility, but we still heavily believe that there's a strong utility for our token. We're just not doing our money raise off it because of obviously the Australian law. So do you think that SDOs are going to kill the utility industry, or do you think they'll come back, sort of like what Prash said, about literally using a utility token for something?
Yeah, I think it'll find a balance, but everyone will probably get too excited about security tokens, just like they got too excited about ICOs, and all the big money will get ultra competitive and all that sort of thing. The funny thing is that the free market will get better, and if you're an investor and you've invested in a terrible ICO and it goes to zero, you're going to learn your lesson and do your own research when people say to do your own research and so on. and people would wise up and get smarter, and it probably would have naturally matured. Whereas, yeah, I guess my fear is that now it gets overly regulated and everyone goes into an STO that maybe shouldn't have, and so on. And yeah, it's unfortunate because we do see it every day that people are already moving away from Australia or going down that STO route that might give a barrier to entry and not allow some people who would have otherwise got in, and so on. So everything, I guess, reaches equilibrium over time.
I think that what you're doing is basically what everyone's going to be doing in the future. You're going to be raising money through security tokens. Notwithstanding, there's still a place for utility tokens, but they're not going to be used to fund projects. They're going to be used to for utility purposes only. So people will sell them as a pre-sale of a service for a platform that's already designed or developed through money that was raised through a security token offering.
Hi guys, I'd like to thank you guys for coming out. It's a really great insight. I have a couple of questions. I'll stick with the first one. What do you guys think about the future of decentralized exchanges that allow anybody to issue an asset permissionlessly and with censorship resistance to sort of displace the current paradigm of centralized exchanges and the taxi medallion-like structure of financial licenses that are currently required to trade security tokens? What do you think about their future as a potential to disrupt the entire stock market paradigm and the entire dichotomy between regular crypto assets and security tokens and the flurry of other tokens that are sure to emerge?
I might speak to this very briefly, just to say that there's always someone to regulate. Right? Whoever's providing this idea, they're probably going to be regulated. If there is truly no one to regulate, then yes, there's no one that is there that has to have a license. But I'm yet to see something that works where there's no one to regulate. Does anyone want to add?
So this is the bit where I put up the chicken wire. Everyone watches the Blues Brothers. You know when people start throwing things at me? Yeah, that's seen in the Blues Brothers, right? So that everyone starts throwing. But what's interesting in that question is that we talked about it before, that everyone thinks that this should all be deregulated, that we don't want to pay taxes. And John McAfee's, everyone has seen him talk, he's great, right? I paid $100 million to the IRS, I'm not paying any more, you can come and get me. I'm not paying any more taxes. And someone mentioned before that we're going to pay the taxes, we're going to pay the power to do the Bitcoin mining and all that. But what's interesting is that there's three parts that we need to look at in what we need to do. So you saw all these bits up here where we've proven it's very hard to, there's three things to regulate. There's the AML CTF, sorry, I'll bore you for 2 minutes, right? The AML CTF, the trading's got to be looked at, and the custodial part as well. So one of the problems is that, be it good or bad, that we do need to keep control a little bit on who's doing what to identify people. And there's a lot of work on decentralised identification of people. That's verification and identification. So at the moment, all of us, it's still a centralised function because we don't have a good way. And I know people don't want to be AML'd and they want to have it anonymous, but it's very hard to do. And the second point, the trading, I put up all these points before about all the regulators are really concerned about this trading, unregulated or decentralised. How do we make sure it's fair for the investors? It's easy to put in place front running and all these kind of things, but in a regulated environment, it's much tougher because we have to prove that our systems don't front run, we don't do all these kind of things. And the third one is the custody. So to me, the ideal solution is we need centralised AML, we need centralised trading purely to maintain market integrity rules, but decentralised ownership of our assets. So you keep your security token, you keep your Bitcoin, but right now people just aren't familiar. The average person on the street to figure out how to set up a wallet and keep their own Bitcoin is too hard. So I think long term, for this to work, so that security tokens, so decentralised, I totally agree, is an absolute way of doing it, but we've just got to keep it fair to all the people that STOs don't become another ICO. But in a regulated world, it'll be extremely difficult for anybody to run a decentralised exchange where there's centralised regulation required. So I'm curious where it all goes, but I think we'll see it all kind of all be centralised and piece by piece be decentralised when we figure out how do you do the decentralised trading and make sure that the market integrity is in place. But it's a very good question.
What if I told you it's been running for about 3 or 4 years?
I haven't seen a license. Show me an EU license.
Without a license.
No, but that's the point. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I've got 100 of these that I'm looking at right now. The challenge is to get it licensed, to take it to an EU regulator. The Attorney General of the United States, right? And so when I say licensed, it's actually quite a big challenge, right? Because if you look just up the road here at Open Markets, we process $250 million a day in transactions. So that's a lot to license. It's $50 billion in turnover, and we've just got to make sure that every one of those investors is protected. So you compare it to the securities industry. A normal broker we have about a $10 million capital adequacy requirement. So it's a little quick story along that. So when someone loses money in a regulated exchange, we pay. We pay. So earlier in the year there were some problems in Australia where there were delays paying out monies for fees. In a regulated broker like Open Markets, if there's a problem, the banks can't give us money to give to the client, and we have to give it to them on T+2. So we have a huge amount of money that's sitting there purely for that reason. So the problem in a decentralised world is when someone loses money, who's going to pay? It's a rhetorical question, so I don't answer it. But they're the kind of protections that we need to think about, because for people to trust the system, that it's okay, because right now the crypto wasn't that bad because it really only affected people that could afford to lose the money, let's be honest. There was a few people that mortgaged houses and when it ran up to 20,000 and dropped right down, but we can't afford that as a country for people that their life savings are tied up in this and things disappear. So there's always got to be somebody, and everyone said buyer beware, and I totally agree. But for crypto to go mainstream, we need to sort custody out and we need a guarantee. I know no one wants to hear that, that's why the chicken wires don't throw anything, right? So I'll hide behind Jason. But that's my 2-second rant on that. But you're 100% right, I'm more than happy to talk about it, but the proof of the pudding is go to ASIC, or let's go to one of the regulators and let's look at regulation. But I agree totally with you.
That's all right, guys. I think we will wrap it up because I do want to have a good get around. I'm sure everyone wants to ask questions to all the guys individually afterwards and mingle. So thanks so much everyone for coming. I hope you've all learned something, and I think the future is very bright for cryptocurrency and security tokens. So thanks to all our sponsors and thanks to all our guests. Come up and say good day and have a drink with them, guys. Cheers.